So in today's video, we're going to be turning the clocks back exactly a year and revisiting the January 2022 transfer window. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking out each Championship club's biggest deal from the last January window and ranking them into the following tier list on how they've got on since. We're not going to be including loan players in today's video, we're just going to be talking about permanent transfers, and as that's the case, there were 3 Championship clubs who didn't make a permanent signing in the last January transfer window. Those clubs being Cardiff, Millwall and Norwich, and so they won't be included in today's video. So we'll go through each of the clubs in order, starting out with Birmingham's biggest January signing, Juninho Bacuna, and I have to admit, I think this one was a really good deal that Birmingham struck. Signed from Rangers, had that instant impact, really elevated the quality in that Blues midfield, and that's one of their probably stronger positions now with all the players they have in that area. Yes, his form probably has tailed off over the last few weeks, like I think quite a few Birmingham players have, but overall, I'm going to put it down as an A signing, particularly given who he's up against in the rest of this tier list. I think Birmingham got a really good deal with him. Dylan McAlliday hasn't really had all too many opportunities at Blackburn. Played a couple of minutes in the league last season, a couple of cameo appearances off the bench. I think got injured when he immediately arrived. He has shown glimpses of quality and is still a really young player, but overall so far, I'm just going to chuck him in the middle. C tier for me, we've just not seen enough of him. Fairly similar story with Owen Dale in at Blackpool as well. Signed from Crewe in the January transfer window. A lot of his appearances for Blackpool last season came from off the bench, but did show real glimpses of quality, especially in a few of those away games. Scored a great goal away at Barnsley, another good one at Reading as well, but has spent this season out on loan at Portsmouth. Overall, probably chuck him into the C category as well. Showed glimpses of quality, but we've just not seen that much of him in the Blackpool shirt. Tim Close in at Bristol City, definitely at least a B for me. Had a really solid impact, I thought, on that side in the second half of last season. Obviously, great defender in years gone by at this level as well with Norwich City. Has missed quite a bit of football so far this season. I think he has had a few knocks here and there, but whenever he has been called upon, I think a solid member of that Bristol City backline. Weghorst in at Burnley. They'd obviously sold Chris Wood in the January transfer window. Newcastle paying quite a bit of money for him, and it was, you know, upon Weghorst to go ahead and score the goals to go ahead and keep Burnley up. He started out fairly brightly in the Burnley shirt, you know, brought a bit of athleticism, bit of energy to that Burnley front line, but things quickly dwindled away from there, and ultimately only scoring 2 goals across 20 appearances for Burnley. Given they paid around 12 million for him and what they needed him to do, I'm going to put it down as an E sign. I think he's, you know, in terms of an individual player, he's probably better than anyone else on this tier list, but in terms of ranking the signing in itself, this one just didn't go to plan, obviously. Burnley will have the chance to go ahead and recoup some of that money for him. Now looks like he's heading out to Manchester United on loan. If he goes ahead and does well there, you know, there's every chance that they get quite a bit of money for him at the end of that loan deal. So all is not completely lost, but judging off what he was expected to do and ultimately what he delivered in the Burnley shirt, I don't think this was a transfer that worked out. Jake Bidwell in at Coventry. They signed him on a free transfer on the January transfer window last year. I'm going to put him down as at least a B. I think solid member of that Coventry side as a starter most weeks, and I think he will be helped by the fact that they've got another wing back on loan now for the rest of the season. I think he was maybe looking a little bit burnt out and out of ideas at times, but having that competition on that left-hand side I think will only be a good thing for Bidwell. Karel Eiting in at Huddersfield. Good player, did very well at Huddersfield initially on loan with them. They then got him actually back in the January transfer window, but didn't really feature all too much for them. He only started in 1 championship match and then had a few other cameo appearances off the bench. I'm going to put it down as a D. I think he is a tidy player, but he barely had an impact really. Signing for Huddersfield and is now back in the Eredivisie where he's doing quite well actually. Right Longman in at Hull City. They had him on loan for the first half of last season and then made that deal permanent in the January window. I think at times he's probably been a little bit of a victim of his own versatility because he can play in so many positions, you know. We've seen him popping up as a wing back, a winger, as a centre forward at times, but had plenty of moments in a Hull City shirt so far. I was actually pretty good that Preston didn't sign him when he was, you know, available and on the market. Thought he would have been a really good fit into our side, but overall I'd give him at least a B. I think still fairly young as well and has that chance to go on and continue to develop. Robert Snodgrass wasn't technically a January signing for Luton, but they did get a deal done for him on a free transfer in February, so I've decided to include him in today's video. And I'll chuck him into the C category. I thought he was a fairly steady player for Luton in that second half of the season, brought some much needed experience and know-how into that Luton midfield, and certainly had an impact in them, ending up getting into the playoffs in the end. Riley McGree in at Middlesbrough, another player I really like, another player who maybe at times has been a little bit of a victim of his own versatility. You know, there have been some discussions about what his best position is. He's already played in a number of roles whilst at Middlesbrough, but when you give him, you know, a licence to get forward, link up with players in the final third, I think he can be a really effective player, and we have seen some absolute moments of brilliance. You know, that goal against Norwich, for example, being a prime moment of McGree in the Middlesbrough shirt so far this season. They did spend quite a bit of money on him, especially compared to a lot of the other players on today's list, so because of that we do judge him probably by a higher threshold, and overall I'd probably put him down as a B transfer. I still think there's more from him to come, especially under Michael Carrick, where he's finally starting to, I suppose, unlock his full potential maybe. Bambo Diaby in at Preston hasn't played a whole lot, but was signed on a free transfer and is becoming a little bit of a cult hero. There have been some moments where he's dropped an absolute disaster clash, you know, Luton and Blackpool away, I think being two examples of that, but when he is fully up to speed and he's given, you know, a little bit of time to gel with the rest of the squad, when he does actually have a run of games, can actually be a really effective player. He certainly looks like a very popular player within the dressing room, and overall I'll put him down as a C transfer, sort of in the middle with Diaby. David Marshall came in at QPR last season on a short-term contract while they were having their goalkeeping crisis. In the end he stepped in before he then got an injury and they had to go ahead and replace him with Kieran Westwood, but an older experienced pro that came in for a few months and did a job. I'd say C sort of signing, short-term contract. Brandon Barker in at Reading, just a bit of a waste of time to be honest with you. I think he actually signed in February. He was a free agent at the time, had a few cameo appearances off the bench, but this one was just a waste of everyone's time really. Georgie Kelly in at Rotherham actually scored the goal in the end on that final day of the season against Gillingham to go ahead and seal promotion. Has scored a handful of goals so far this season in what has been fairly restricted game time. He's often been their sort of super sub who hasn't started in that many matches, but has had an impact in off from the bench and clearly has a bit about him in the final third. Everything considering the context, I'll say it was a B level signing. I still think there's a decent player in there who will chip in with a few more goals this year. Adam Davis in at Sheffield United hasn't really played that much, but was signed as a backup goalkeeper, and whenever he has been called upon, I think he's looked solid enough, to be honest with you. Obviously, when Wes Foderingham had that suspension earlier on in the season, he was forced to come in, made a really good penalty save against Norwich, had a really good game against West Brom as well, so considering what he's there for, B level signing, really good backup choice. Lewis Baker, a bit of a tough one because he started out so well at Stoke, and initially so, I probably would have had him down as an A-level signing. You know, scored some absolute worldies for Stoke in the second half of last season, long-range expert, but this season I'd probably drop him down to a B-tier signing. Still think there's a very good player in there on his day. Consistency been a bit of an issue for him lately though, and his performance has sort of been a little bit more hit and miss this year, it would seem. Patrick Roberts in at Sunderland, I think they struck an absolute bargain with him. In the end I think they got him on a free transfer, didn't they? Signed on an initial short-term contract for Sunderland, but had a brilliant impact on their League One campaign in the second half of the season. Ended up scoring in that dramatic playoff semi-final against Sheffield Wednesday as well, and has adapted really well to Championship life so far. In his previous stints that he had out on loan in the Championship, I think everyone could see that naturally he was a really good player, but no one had quite been able to get it out of him in terms of a consistent performance on a consistent basis. But Sunderland, I feel like, have untapped that potential, and I'm going to put it down as an A signing. I thought it was brilliant in League One, and he's continued to progress in the Championship. Andy Fisher in at Swansea, bit of a difficult one really. He came in last season, started in the majority of their games in the second half of last season. I think started this season as their number one, but has since lost his place to Bender as he was just a little bit too unreliable in net. There'd be one too many clangers in there, either whether that would come from, you know, distribution or being a little bit weak in some instances. He has played plenty of matches though, but honestly, between that sort of D and C category. I think because of the games he's played, I'll put him down as a C, but I don't think the Swansea have got a great return on their investment so far, given that he's been, you know, dropped to the bench recently. Kiambe in at Watford, another really weird one, to be honest. I think especially considering they spent around about 4 million on him, going off transfer marks figures, seems a little bit crazy. He does have these odd fleeting performances that you see and think, oh, there's a real player in there, but those are far too inconsistent to justify a really hefty price tag. Watford have had issues, I think, with midfield all season. I think he's currently out injured, isn't he? But I don't think he's gone anywhere near to justifying a £4 million price tag for him, so I'm going to put him down as a D transfer, I think. Daryl DK at West Brom is a tough one to judge because they did spend quite a bit of money on him, and he clearly is a very good player, but he was hit with that long-term injury in January, and so we barely got to see anything from him last season, and only, you know, fairly recently are we getting to see him in a West Brom shirt. From the glimpses that we have seen of him at the Hawthorns, I think he's looked like a really effective striker, and I think in years to come probably will end up being an A tier signing for them, but he's not quite justified that so far. I'm going to drop him down to a B because of those injuries, but there's no doubt, you know, with time to come, he will probably move up in my rankings, but because of the limited time we've seen of him, I'm going to put him as a B, but I do still rate him quite highly. Finishing it off then with Josh McGuinness, I'm going to put him down as a C transfer, I think. Useful player in League One, but in the Championship, I just don't think quite cuts it. Works hard and is a grafter up front. You know, did chip in with some goals to help get Wigan over the line in League One last season, which I'm sure they were grateful for, but in the Championship, I just don't think has that quality. We have been here before with McGuinness, you know, with Hull previously and Bolton before that. There you have it there, guys. Those are my rankings for Championship signings in the previous January transfer window. Would you move any of these about? Do let me know in the comments down below. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and do stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content. Apart from that, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.